that's a started recording now.
Okay. Thank you very much, and welcome everybody to the Audit Committee of the Angus Health and Social Care Partnership Integrated Joint Board. I'd particularly like to welcome Chris Boyle, who's a new member of the Audit Committee. It's fantastic to see you, Chris, and I really do think that having the staff side perspective will really enhance what we do here, and we're just delighted to see you on board. So thank you for that. And before I kick off onto the agenda, I just want to thank everyone for everything that you've been doing in whatever role you've got throughout the pandemic, as an individual, as a worker, as a carer, as a strategic plan developer, whatever. It's been an incredibly challenging time, and I fully appreciate that we'll all have had our own journey on that period. So moving on to the agenda, do we have any apologies?
Just Charlie Sinclair.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And any declarations of interest? I have one, which I briefly covered off before the meeting. I have a specific dispensation as a non-executive director of Public Health Scotland, as a COSLA representative. So I'll make that declaration now. I understand that I may not need to compile the paperwork for that, but as a standing item, that is my declaration. And I'll obviously, I'm allowed to stay in and discuss and vote if necessary. Okay, and item 3, if we can move on to that, please, which is the minutes of the previous meeting, which have already been approved through the IJB because of the timing and the schedule of meetings. Could I ask, first of all, is everyone happy with that, or do you have anything that you want to raise coming from the minutes, from page 4 to page 11? Or is everyone happy with those as approved by the IJB? Yeah, okie dokie. Right, bear with me while I get onto the page required. And if we can then move on to agenda item 3B, which is the action points update. Does anyone want to talk to any of the action points in that, please? Peter, yep.
Yeah, thanks. I'm concerned about the continual delays in the induction. If you look at top of page 13, I know things have been difficult, but we're going to be all sort of, you know, old timers by the time we get to the induction, and I think we need to address it fairly soon.
Well, actually, I should have said at the start of the meeting, obviously the development event had to be cancelled and will be rescheduled. Sandy, do you have anything you want to come in and say on that, or Gail? Gail does, yeah.
Yes, I was trying to get my mute button on. I don't know if my hand function's working, Chair.
It is, yeah, it's up. I've got it.
Peter, I can confirm it's nearly finished. It's actually on my desk at the moment, and it's reading very well. Emma Jane had comments as well, so I've only made another couple of minor edits that I'm waiting on being corrected there. So I don't know if you want to see it, but it should be ready by the end of this week.
Okay. Is that helpful, Peter? You please?
Yep, I've given it a thumbs up. That's great. Yeah, thanks, Gail.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, Sandy.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, Gail has just asked if people would like to have a look at that draft documentation. I think what we can maybe say is, if anybody at this table does want to have a look at it, maybe they could email Gail or myself, and we'll share that draft documentation. Sorry, I'm still just getting used to 2 screens. It's an amazing novelty having had 1 screen for 7 months. Sorry, I'll look at the camera. Yeah, so if anybody around this table would like to kind of have a look at that draft documentation, just as we're putting it together, yeah, drop Gail or myself an email, and we can try and feed that in. Chair, you mentioned about the development session. Unfortunately, we had to cancel that at the end of October. I think that performs a useful function in our annual cycle of keeping everybody kind of up to speed with various angles on the Audit Committee. I do hope to schedule that again for January or February. So I'll be in touch with everybody about that, and hopefully we can fit it in. I appreciate it will be slightly late notice, but I think it'd be good to be able to do that still. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So any of the action points that anyone wants to talk to, any of the red ones, for example? It's good to see green and amber there, progress. Fully appreciate capacity and pressures on through COVID have impacted on other areas. Any questions, any comments? Nope, people okay with that? Okay, thank you. So been asked to note that and the progress. Moving on to item 4, which is internal audit plans progress report, and that has Tony's name against it. Tony Gaskin, you here?
Mhm.
Yep, you're here, Tony.
I'm muted, which people will be grateful for, but I'll unmute myself for this at least.
Good, got you.
Right, if we just hold on for the moment. Right, so obviously as usual and as in previous years, we're just bringing a progress report. There is, so you can see that the data quality, you'll remember that came, and we've got an appendix just picking up on what happened after the draft final. So you remember there was some discussion around that report, and I wouldn't propose to go through it again unless any members have any questions, because we went through it in some, I think, very useful detail the last time out, and there's some very helpful comments from Gail, which we've taken forward, and indeed others. So in terms of governance and assurance, we've agreed to scope, which will be different this year. We've tended to do some fairly standard stuff on governance. This isn't a normal year, it's not normal governance, so we will be picking up on that, but also again, picking up, and I think it was Catherine last time that talked about workforce issues. So that's where we're going to pick up on those. Now, it's not going to be a full audit, I don't want to overpromise, but we will be picking up on those issues as they hit the governance arrangements and making sure that those are picked up. And we've actually got an assignment plan for that that's been agreed. And moving forward, the commission service providers, this is something where we may well pick up looking at a slightly different approach to that work. And in fact, on the commission service providers, I'm looking at this, but we did have some discussions around looking at a slightly different way of approaching that audit, which I will be discussing with my local authority colleagues. And the reason I'm slightly hesitant is I rather thought it was in that paper. I can't see it. I think, Sandy, we were discussing these, and certainly there were some detailed discussions.
Can I come in, Tony, in chair?
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Sorry, I think Tony's getting overtaken by the pace of events, because the world is just turning so quickly that a conversation of probably 10 days ago feels like forever ago. And I think what has probably happened, we've probably written this paper and had lots of conversations since then. So Tony, can I try and just fill the gaps in?
Yeah,
hopefully this will sound familiar. So the Audit Committee will recognise the Commission Service Provider as an audit we plan to do as part of the Internal Audit Plan. We signed that off in the Internal Audit Plan when it came to the IJB's Audit Committee, I think at the August meeting. What we kind of knew a bit at the time, but it's certainly very much emerged now, is that to deliver that audit programme, that audit properly, we need to have a pretty full engagement with the Angus Council Procurement Department. And as many of you know, and particularly the likes of Catherine in particular will know, that procurement department is under quite a lot of pressure right now, dealing with the issues that are exactly falling out of COVID and supporting all our providers. So we always knew when we were speaking to our internal auditors that we didn't want to place an extra burden on a support department during that relatively critical period. So it made delivering this audit plan relatively difficult. Meanwhile, and quite separately, a number of you will possibly remember that we have a series of unresolved issues regarding some of our income management. We've been in ongoing discussion with Ian Lorimer, Angus Council's Director of Finance, about improving processes around income management. The problems with that, we documented in IJB papers from about September 2019 onwards. And we were going to try and resolve them through an improvement programme. The improvement programme was being talked about in January and February, but kind of came a bit unstuck in terms of our ability to access people, the resource to do that improvement programme when COVID kind of came along and took effect in March. We're still struggling to identify the resource to do that, but we feel the skill set of the internal auditors is one that could be very helpfully match the resource and the skill set we need to help do the improvement work on the income management. So in discussion with Ian Lorimer, we felt it would be helpful to propose a realignment of the internal audit plan resource from the original intention of Commission Services to an advisory role regarding income management. That would kind of really help us out on that other objective. I've since discussed this with Tony, which is why Tony is absolutely remembering it. And we've also discussed it with Rachel, who's on the line today, because we were aware that the Commission Service report itself should form part of our governance reviews at the end of the year. But as I say, on a pragmatic basis, we don't feel we'll probably be able to deliver that properly. So I think in the last 10 days, we've had these conversations, and Tony and Rachel, I think I am going to speak for them now, but they can chip in a second, are both comfortable, I feel, with reattributing the resource in our plan from this original intention of a Commission Services audit into an advisory piece of work regarding income management, thereby solving another problem that we have. I think we would therefore expect, and if we go down that route, and I'm going to propose that in a second, we would then put Commission Services to the top of our list of things to be looking at in the next financial year. So hopefully that's a sufficient explanation of this particular change to the audit plan. It is us trying to respond to things not on the hoof, but on a pragmatic basis to reflect the needs and the situations that we're in, and hopefully serve the other risks that the IJB has and serve those risks well and help us resolve some of them. Hopefully that makes sense. I'm happy to take any questions. Equally, Tony or Rachel might want to chip in.
Okay, and that links into the item above the Commission Services role as well, on the governance and assurance.
The income issues, Chair, are ultimately one of our there are outstanding actions on some of our follow-up audit reports. So they are unresolved governance actions that we are trying to solve. So we haven't managed to solve them so far because we haven't been able to identify the resource. And this is a way of mapping some resource into to help that problem.
Good. And Andy Jack has his hand up. So Andy, please come in.
Just again for my information, Sandy, what areas are covered by Commission Services in general, and what income are we talking about? Is that income to the IJB from the Commission Services or income to the Commission Service providers? I'm not
No, sure, Andy. Yeah, and obviously we haven't managed to capture this written in words in the paper. They're two very different issues. The Commission Services are the services that the IJB commissions from third parties, particularly the likes of independent sector care home provision, independent sector home care provision, and also other work with the voluntary sector. So that's a big chunk of our business. You'll be aware of some of the things we've spoken about over the years. So we were looking at issues associated with the resilience of that sector, and we will come back to that. I'm suggesting next year. Now, at the moment, that sector is being supported by Scottish Government COVID funding. Separately, the income issues that we were talking about were income associated with contributions made by service users towards the cost of service delivery. That's about £10 million per annum, including people making contributions towards staying in residential care or other supporting care services, even things like community meals and telecare and all that kind of stuff. So quite a separate issue, but one where we flagged up problems last year in terms of our processes.
Yeah, I just wanted to know what areas we're talking about. Thank you.
Okay, and Peter has his hand up too. Peter, you'll need to open your mic, please.
Sorry
Thank you.
about that. Yeah, coming back to the governance and assurance side, I'm wondering, I've been wondering for some time, Tony has mentioned it once or twice, and I know we just had a discussion about it and now things are catching up with us, but what struck me, I was going to raise it anyway, and then the papers for the COSLA meeting came through, and they are planning for a number of strategies, what they call a plan for transition and transformation, which takes note of services adapting and being delivered differently, including greater use of technology to keep people connected. Their proposal to the councillors for reforming some of their strategies will be that it is intended the plan represents a bridge between existing strategies and where we go next. It deals with the impact of COVID-19, but also looks at what people have said they want to see moving forward. It is intended that this plan will be followed for the next 2 years before new strategies are discussed and developed. And I'm wondering whether, as a governance body, we need to go to the IJB and say, we think that the strategic planning group should do a similar thing for the whole strategic commissioning plan. Because what I don't want is, I don't want to lose all the efficiencies that we seem to have gained. We've cut out huge amounts of paperwork, we've cut out huge amounts of delay. You know, I don't want to go back to business as usual. I want to go to stay with new business. And the only way we can do that is to have a look at the commissioning plans and see where life has changed and where we should just continue doing what we're doing now. Things like near me for doctors' surgeries. And as I say, things like flexibility and SDS. All that sort of stuff I think we need to capture rather than let it drift back into the old bad ways of bureaucracy and delay.
I don't know if I've got hands. I'm not quite sure I'll put my hand up in Zoom, but and I'm not sure I'm on screen. But if I could come in at this point, Chair.
Sure, absolutely. I'm not seeing a hand up, but fire away.
Right. So those are all things that we've been contemplating, as Sandy's aware, and they are captured in part, at least, in the what we call extended questions. So if you remember, the Audit Scotland had a set of questions for audit committees, which I felt were very helpful. We as FDF had previously produced a slightly more comprehensive list, and we've actually combined those, and those will form part of the governance work we're doing. Not in detail, no, so not necessarily down to the level of individual commission plans or anything like that, but all of the questions that have been asked are in a set of sustainability principles, which we've shared with Sandy, and quite happy to share with anyone that will read them, to be honest. But you know, they are all captured, and certainly as part of the work we're doing with NHS Tayside, which will obviously include how things are working with the HSCP/IJB. And we've always been clear, and I'm sure I was talking at great length at one of the previous audit committees about the need for all strategies to be revised. And in a sense, your commissioning plan is just a manifestation of your overall strategy. Your overall strategy needs to change. Obvious examples, things like mental health. So what we've been saying across the piece is that your demand has changed, your ability to deliver has changed, your resources have changed, but also the options available to us through things like remote working, through a greater, if you like, plasticity in the ability of both staff and patients and the public to accept change. All of those things have changed. Therefore, you need to start with the strategies at the top and work your way down. But equally, the individual bits of transformation, remobilisation that you're doing need to feed back up. So when you're looking at a service and you have a revised view of what that service can deliver, that needs to feed back up into your strategy, because your strategy needs to change because you can't do everything you used to. It also needs to be reflected in the risk register. And there's also a point at which we need to capture the good stuff, which there has been plenty, and we've touched on it lightly, but we intend to go further. But you know, all the enthusiasm, all the ability to change, all of that stuff needs to be captured and spread. So it's a complex thing, and it's not something you can do kind of like, but we can look at the direction and the extent to which these things have been discussed with the IJB board. So we can pick up those things, and that will no doubt generate further work in future. but that is certainly something we're tremendously interested in. And if it's helpful, I'll share the FTF remobilisation principles. And they come purely from the top of our heads. There's no research there, but they do cover all of the things that you've been discussing, and we will pick those up with Sandy in overview. But please don't think that I'm saying I'm going to be diving down into every single transformation program to see how that's bounced up and down the line. It's about the broader principles and processes, but we will be picking those up. Sorry, that's a long answer, but I think it's probably a long subject.
Okay, that's good. Are you happy with that, Peter? Okay. So Gail has her hand up, but I know Sandy had his hand up before that. Is your hand, were you waving, Sandy, to come in? Or shall we go to
Yeah,
Gail?
I was, but I just think maybe if we just keep this conversation in mind when we get to page 39 of the papers. I know that feels like a long way away. Don't look now, keep it as a surprise. When we get to page 39, let's just refer back to the conversation.
Okay, thank you. Gail?
Peter, I wholeheartedly agree with your comments. So we absolutely won't be going back to the way things were. In addition, I'm not sure if you're aware, Peter, that we're undertaking a test of change into KOMP units. They're quite revolutionary, and yet they're very simple computers. For those of you that haven't seen them, they're designed.
Yes, I've heard
to
of them. Yeah.
Yeah, we're doing a test of change, and we've got 14 of the devices just now, Peter, in Angus, and we're expected to conclude that test of change in March. If you want to know any more about it, then I can let you know out with the meeting.
That's good.
Funny enough, the comp kit had sprung into my mind in that conversation because we heard about it through Moneyfeith Befriend.
Yeah, I read about it in one of the papers. I can't remember where I read about it. I was impressed. I thought that's a really good idea.
Yeah, it's really good. So Peter, is your hand up for another question?
Sorry, no, that was up for, because I didn't put it down.
Okay. So if there are no more questions, can we, sorry, Rachel.
Sorry, Chair, can I jump in? Sorry, it's hard phoning in from mobile phone because I can't raise my hand. It was just to say on the proposed change to the internal audit plan, I've discussed it with Sandy and confirmed with Tony that the core areas that we would rely on internal audit for are being covered, and I'm quite content with it changing to income management work. And just to say, I discussed it briefly with Cathy Wiley at Angus Council Internal Audit yesterday when I was meeting with her for my council audit planning. So we were both quite content with that approach, and she'll be picking that up with Tony in due course, because that will provide useful assurance
thank
to
you
the
very
IJB
much.
and to us. So thank you.
Good. So we can agree, we can note this report, please, and agree to the reprofiling as discussed. Yes. Thank you very much, everyone. Okay, now let me find the next page. Okay, so item 5, it's the follow-up actions from the internal audit reports, and I think Sandy will be the one who will talk us through this to start with. Yep.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So this is a regular format that we put together where we're kind of letting everybody see where we are with internal audit follow-up actions. The narrative of the report covers a few of the main points to note. In particular, there's a point under 2.2 about corporate support arrangements. We have written to Angus Council and NHS Tayside about that, highlighting the importance of this. Risk management at 2.3, I think this is undoubtedly something which is quite a complicated and involved improvement programme. We absolutely got going very quickly on that. We had an improvement plan set out. We haven't really got round to being able to implement that improvement programme just because of the management capacities that we have available to us. But Jill Galloway, who will be at the board this afternoon, has been to previous audit committees, very quickly got an improvement plan together. But just the very act of getting people around to deal with relatively complicated issues, some of which are best looked at in terms of getting the best outcome, best looked at alongside our neighbouring IJBs and partners, makes that quite a hard one to take forward. But we've got the improvement plan written up. We're just struggling to kind of get through the actions on that one. So I think that's the main points, Chair.
Okay.
From that, but otherwise happy to take questions.
Thank you very much. Anyone have a question on that for Sandy? No.
Yeah, sorry,
Yeah.
I have one, and it's on page 34, AN05. I'm trying to find it. And we seem to be going backwards on that. At one point it said, it's at the bottom of,
Page 34, the last row.
yeah, at the bottom of that page, and it says good progress, and then it was overdue, not started yet. So I don't understand what's happened there.
Well, it'll help. Maybe I had flagged that up as well in my wee chat with Sandy yesterday. So, Hawkeye, well done.
Okay. Chair, let me, sorry, that was in my notes. I'm still struggling to go through all this stuff electronically. Yes, that was a point I was going to cover. So when we assess that as good progress in August, we were making good progress at the time because we had got the plan together, and the plan was saying this is how all these things are going to work. In terms of delivering the actual plan, which I was mentioning a second ago, this is one where we really have not got the delivery of that plan started. So we kind of know we've got the outline, and it was looking like we were making really good progress in August. But of course, then for one or two of the individual bits, and this one in particular, the one that you're picking up, Peter, we haven't managed to progress that one at all. So it's because it's one of the more complicated things in the overall improvement thing. So yeah, the original assessment was a rather broad, yeah, we're on track here, we've got the plan developed, but actually now we've gone a few months on, we know that the actual implementation is struggling.
Right. That's okay. Yeah, sure.
Fine. I think Gail wants to come in now, please.
Yes, Peter, I've also had a conversation with Hilary Walker, who leads on this for NHS Tayside, and she was going to attend a session with us around October of last year to formally discuss the risk appetite aspect, but that had to be postponed as well in the midst of the pandemic. So again, the offer is there from Hilary Walker if we feel that we need to include that for support. I think it's a subject that not everybody knows a lot about. So if members would like me to follow that up, I will do that.
I think it'd be good.
Yeah, that'd be helpful. I think everyone recognises, the impact of COVID on a lot of the work that we're doing, and we do appreciate the efforts to keep a pace with things. And I guess, if there's a decision to be made about what's dropped or what's rescheduled, we will see that coming through. And I'm certainly feeling confident that the information we're getting is, officers are on the ball with that, and they know their subject matter really well. And there is, a good degree of trust around coming to the audit committee when there's conversations to be had. So on that note, can we note the report and the progress to date, and then move on to the next item? Everyone, thank you. So, right, we're moving on to the governance action plan now on page 36, item 6. And again, that's Sandy. Over to you, Sandy.
Thank you, Chair. Well, as if by magic, we get quite near to page 39 here, which I was mentioning a second ago. Just quickly, before we go into the general report, page 39 has a point. It's following up number 10, and it's an extract from the internal audit report that we received at the end of the last financial year. In the far right column from that, Tony's team, in terms of the internal audit report, noted that the strategic plan did need to be reviewed to reflect COVID-19. And he also acknowledged that we would have to kind of do a bit more learning on that. And we've started to see some of the learning come through in papers that have been to the SPG last month, and there's one or two references in the strategic financial plan going to the IJB this afternoon. But Peter, that I think is the gist of what you were talking about earlier on. It's making sure we pick up everything comprehensively. So it was really just kind of linking back, the internal audit people had flagged that up from April. We need to kind of keep on picking that up on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, I'm again amazed by your magic, because in August it wasn't started, and in December it's completed. I think it's brilliant.
Gail's hand's up. Is that a legacy hand, Gail?
Yes, sorry, legacy.
That's okay. I know I'm dipping in and out of different documents and what have you. So so I think I would be keen to see in the review of the integration scheme, for example, items of really good practice where that integration has really benefited the services we deliver for the people of Angus. I'm not sure if the format will allow that, but I think it might bring it to life in a really helpful way. Does anyone else have any questions? I'm just going back, Andy, and then Catherine.
Yeah,
Andy?
just on the same subject, there are some long-term items that have been there. Is it realistic to keep them on here? It's probably heresy to say that, but maybe we should delete some audit pickup points if there's no realistic hope of achieving any of them. I'm talking about ones that have been on since 2018, further back. Or is that caught up in that item 10? Is that going to be a root and branch review of everything that we've got in front of us and just throw out the stuff we don't need? Is that what I'm understanding? Is that correct?
Does anyone want to come in on that?
Sure.
Well, hang on a sec. Catherine's coming in next. Are you responding to that point, Graham?
Yeah. In a way, it's a similar sort of point that there's lots of red and a little green on these documents, and some items are going to be much more important than others, and there's no sense of priority, which speaks to what Andy has just been talking about. It's you know, it would be good to see what the priorities are, not just a list that's like a waiting list. You know, it's not prioritized, as it were.
Okay.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know whether this is conventional, just the way in which things are done both in the health service and the IJB. But I find it really quite, not really useful.
Okay. Anyone want to come in on that? Sandy?
So maybe I'll let Tony go first.
Thanks, Sandy. Yeah, so two things. One, yeah, all of these recommendations would have had a priority when they were done. So every single audit report has a priority. And then exciting news, we're changing our priority ratings. There's now going to be 4. So there's even more gradings to look forward to. More importantly, this is a subject that we've reflected on. And we're already doing a piece of work with NHS Tayside, which is in a similar position, maybe for different reasons. But it too has a long list of things, as indeed to some of our other clients. What you tend to find is that the ones that hang around longest are the most intractable. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't mean they're the least important. It just means they're the hardest to do. What we have done is a paper, and I'm quite happy, I'll discuss this with Sandy, but we can do this as part of our governance work, is actually go through these. So what we're doing is some things, bluntly, if we haven't done them by now, maybe you just think, well, we're going to have to learn to live without them. Other things you say, well, do you know what, with COVID going on, that can sit on the back burner. Others actually might be more important in these circumstances. And we've got a grading system. So we already had the original grading system, but that's kind of passed away now because things have moved on. So we're quite happy to go through as part of our process and as part of our follow-up work, actually discussing these with Sandy and recategorizing them so that we can get that sense of priority. And I think this is getting rather reflexive, but that was one of our recommendations, to kind of really consider which ones are the highest priority, which ones we can do with limited capacity. And a lot of that will, in the short term at least, be about COVID. Which ones become more urgent, which ones less. And we're quite happy to go through that process with Sandy and Gail. And we've got a methodology for doing that already. So that should be relatively straightforward. And I wouldn't want to commit Sandy to anything, because he's going to have to do the actual work. But I think we could get that done before the next audit committee, as long as that doesn't give Sandy a nervous breakdown, which I wouldn't want to be responsible for.
Well, the next audit committee is April. So, I mean, and thank you for reinforcing the point that I had previously made. That's helpful. Catherine, can I ask you to come in? you've got your hand up, yeah.
It was just if there's any more information about where we are with the review of the integration scheme, which I know has been initiated across Tayside, but I'd be quite keen to be cited on that from my role within Angus Council.
I think at our last meeting, Catherine, you had made the offer that you were keen to be engaged in that process. So I think, yeah, that would be good to have you engaged in it as soon as that's practical. Well, any more questions? Gail's hand's up again. Oh, Sandy's hand.
No, Vivian Davidson, it's been confirmed Vivian Davidson will support the 3 chief officers with the review from with the integration scheme. At the moment, we've got support for a light touch from the NHS Tayside chief exec in that, and Vivian's focus just now is on the mental health aspects.
Okay. Sandy.
Yeah, thanks. I'll just come back to a few of the comments there, including kind of references that Graham's just made. We do actually have a column there. The third column in does talk about the priority, and those are the priorities that have come from Tony's source documents or other source documents. But of course, Graham's right, they're not listed in the order priority, they're listed chronologically, which I appreciate doesn't make picking up the high priorities particularly easy. I have at times, not of my own volition, but in some of the reports said we'll evolve or drop some of the recommendations or move them into something else if they've evolved into something else. We have done that every now and then, but particularly on this report that we're looking at right now, a lot of the actions at the top that have been around longest are exactly the type that Tony refers to. And Graham, I think hopefully you remember in the main IJB finance reports, we are now including an extract of governance issues that we are feeling are particularly significant and are difficult to solve. And that includes things like the integration scheme, the corporate support, large hospital set aside, and hosted services, which are all at the top of this list. I'm not obviously wanting to lose those because they are things that we really need to solve. They are the difficult ones. So I'm happy to see if we can find a way of kind of making it more accessible, to the members, so it does tease out things that are priorities. And I absolutely am very conscious it looks very red all the time. I wish it didn't. But I'll try and take that into account that Graham and others have fed back.
Okay, thanks, Sandy. Andy, your hand's up. Is that
yes, it's a new hand.
New hand, marvellous.
Just going back to what Tony said, that we seem to be always complaining about things getting held up, and then it's always shoved onto Sandy's shoulders to solve it, and then he's kind of under pressure all the time. I'm just trying to understand what's the mechanism for removing or deleting or reprioritizing items. I would have thought it would not be just solely Sandy's responsibility. I would think we are all jointly involved in that process, and is there any way we can help by providing some resource to ease that burden, or should it be part of a development session perhaps to reprioritize these items? I'm not sure. We say, yeah, we'll take this away and we'll go and look at it again. I'm not sure who goes and looks at it all. I thought we should be involved in it.
I think Sandy was wanting to come in there. Yeah.
Thanks, Andy, and thanks, Chair. Andy, certainly we would never remove an action point without kind of having it okayed by this committee. Equally, sometimes an action point will evolve into something else or be superseded, in which case we again would flag it up to this committee. But I'm not averse to dropping things that have almost kind of got past their sell-by date. But the list of actions on that paper, the top 4 or 5 are the long-term ones that we still aspire to solve. And then only this afternoon we've got the first paper about large hospital set aside that's going to the IJB for a couple of years. And it doesn't suddenly solve it, but I actually think that moves the issue on, and it kind of deals with where did we got to date, and it allows us to say, well, the actions from here on are now this. So I'm happy to obviously review these things, but we wouldn't drop things without kind of coming through this group. And in terms of deciding about dropping things or evolving them, I would speak to the likes of Gail, but I would also speak to the likes of our auditors about that to see if if there's a consensus that can emerge around things like that.
Okay, thank you. Tony, you coming in there?
Thanks, Chad. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, right. No, so I think in terms of these, what we're left with, sometimes there's kind of a feeling that these things are there to kind of keep the auditors happy, which is never a good reason for doing anything, because bluntly, auditors are never happy. It's not part of our makeup. What is important is those are all big strategic things, and they will be caught up in what has been discussed previously about this revision. So the revision of the integration scheme will cover a lot of them, or should do, or needs to in sense. It can't just be some kind of, there has to be something. The thing is, Gail was talking about, or was it Catherine? I can't, but someone was talking about picking up all the good things that have been done. That's important. But there's also a bit about understanding what's left. And for example, and we have seen movement on admin support, but the integration scheme could be just learning from experience, better at making sure the IJB gets what it needs in order to be able to deliver this strategic change. And in some cases, that will require the partners to have the capacity to be able to deliver that. So it gets complicated, but these are all big ticket issues. None of them are there to keep us happy. That's not the point of them. They're actually the issues that you are addressing as an IJB as a whole. And that's why they left, because they're big. And there's a large sense in which COVID threw all this stuff up in the air. So even if some of these things had been done, they would need to be redone anyway. And even that discussion about the risk appetite earlier, if you had got a risk appetite, you'd have to completely revise it in the light of COVID, because guess what? The world got a lot riskier. So actually, I think it's a really good time for a reset. A lot of these things won't go away, but they might look quite different. And one of the things we would want to do with Sandy and Gail is actually look at what you're doing anyway, linking it so that these things don't look red. They actually link to what you already know is going on, and we can perhaps deal with them in a slightly different way. But probably most of them will still be there in one form or another. Okay,
thanks. I found that really helpful, Tony. I hope Andrew did as well. Peter has his hand up.
Yeah, just to follow up, that was good, Tony, appreciate that. But to follow up what Andy said, it does seem that all this responsibility lies on Sandy's shoulders. And I'm wondering if we maybe should have an additional session, just a very short session that says, let's get these things in priority. So Sandy knows that some of them are going to be long term. Okay, that's fine. Some of them are going to be short term. Some of them are going to be hard, and some of them are going to be easy. Let's try and sort those out so that we can start moving things forward, along with all the other stuff that's going on in terms of the integration scheme and the effect of COVID and so on. But I think it would be handy, and I think Graham made the point, there's a sea of red, and we don't know which one's the most important. I think we should.
Sandy, do you want to come back in on that, or are we noting those points?
There's nothing I like more than talking about things we haven't got around to doing, because we have, by default, had them on this list for a long, long time. I'm actually thinking, as you're saying that, Peter, and also reflecting what others have said earlier on. Maybe it's maybe a half-hour slot in our development session. That's be another few weeks away, and we could put it in there and just talk about some of the where do we go with some of the intractable ones, and how do we kind of have a sense of priority about them. So I'll maybe put that down as an option for us to. Well, if we can put it down in a minute, we can put that down as something to kind of try to address in the development session.
Okay. And Chris Boyle's waving at me.
Yes. Thanks, Councillor. It's just really support what Pete said earlier and Sandy there, and probably just from my own point of view as being the new kid on the block to this committee. I think an exercise on setting those priorities would actually, on a personal level, be helpful for me in order to be able to actively contribute to the work of this committee. So yeah, I would certainly welcome that as well.
Good. That would be great. Thanks very much. So, if there's no more questions, can we go back to the recommendations? We're being asked to note the governance action plan, and we're also being asked to request an update about the ministerial strategic group to be brought to the IJB in February, because I think there had been no action attached to that the last time it was there. So I'd certainly support that. Is everyone else agreed? I think it's an important thing to do, to make the linkages. Okay, super, thank you. And moving on to item 7 is the external annual audit report that has Sandy's name attached to it again. So
yeah, thanks, Chair. So Rachel presented the auditor's external audit report for 1920 when we met in August. It had a limited number of actions at the end of it, and what we've done is we've captured them in this report here and just set out where we are. Rachel will be able to comment herself in a second, but I think we recognise that a lot of these things are sometimes not going to have a definitive completing point. We've suddenly solved that forever. They are kind of ongoing actions. The point here, the main point from 1920 was about financial sustainability. And this afternoon, we have a first draft of a financial plan for the next 3 years going to the IJB. It's a long time, a few months until we sign that off. And it doesn't necessarily make everything perfect, because that's really hard to put into a financial plan. But it does what we can to address issues about financial sustainability and lets the whole board know where we are. So I'm kind of feeling we've done what we can in the context of formally responding to the audit point, but it doesn't go away. It doesn't mean it's suddenly solved. We would come back to that. So hopefully the way we've reflected that is okay and understandable for the board, the audit committee, and for Rachel as well.
okay, Rachel, do you want to come in there at all?
If I could just comment briefly on that, to agree with what Sandy said, these issues are largely long-standing, perennial issues. Financial sustainability is an issue that you can expect us to report on. We're required to report on it every year, and it's quite likely that the IJB will continue to report a funding gap in its strategic financial plan. So in terms of actions against something that is essentially ongoing, I'm content with the action that's agreed. We observe the board meetings to see how the IJB engages with the strategic financial plan, and how it considers it, and how that financial plan addresses the funding gap that is a threat to your financial sustainability. So in that one, I'm content that it's marked as complete, but the work will be ongoing, and our interest is in that ongoing work and how that plays out for the IJB and its financial position each year. And in terms of capacity restrictions, the IJB can't fix that one itself. As we've said in the previous paper, there are long-standing serious issues that require partner engagement or input from other agencies to address. And I'm content that action is continuing with partners on this, and also that IJB members are kept informed of that action.
Okay, thanks, Rachel. Anyone have any questions on that paper? Graham does, yep.
Just, it's a small point, but it's really about assurance that that the consultation, there's been regular consultation with the health board, the financial directorate, the health board on this. Yeah.
Okay, Sandy.
So rather helpfully, I can say within the last 3 hours, I have spent one of those hours with Stuart Lyle, Director of NHS Finance of NHS Deeside. I don't do that every Wednesday, but what we do is we do it regularly. We mentioned a wee while ago about the Ministerial Strategic Group report, and just on the last item, that report had a number of recommendations about how integration joint boards and their partners should work. And one of the recommendations that came out of that was that at a senior finance level, all 3 parties, the health board, the council, and the IJB, should get together. And we have been doing that very regularly for the last, I think, probably about 15 months. And I said myself, Stuart, and Ian Lorimer for Angus Council just happened to meet this morning. The fact it was this morning is, of course, complete chance. The fact that it's about now in the cycle of the year is not chance. So we actually originally had today's meeting scheduled for November. Our next one is scheduled for early February. And those 2 meetings, the one in November and end up being today, and the one in February, are built around the financial planning timeline. So one at the very start of the financial planning timeline, accepting everything's iterative, and then one as we get a wee bit more into the financial planning timeline in February. The Stuart is cited on the papers that we've shared at the IJB board today. I would talk to him through that today. I'd shared it with him earlier on. Likewise, he and Lorimer. So we are doing that, Graham. And although I don't speak to Stuart all the time, we just have regular fixed meetings. There is other open dialogue with senior finance people in NHS.
Yeah, I mean,
okay.
I see it from the other side, from and I ask the same question of both. Yeah, just to assure ourselves that there is dialogue going on and regular. Yeah. It's no blame game. Okay, that's fine.
But this is maybe an unfair question, but I'm just interested to know, say if last year and previous years around our financial planning and the unknowns at the same stage in the annual journey, say we were sitting at an 8 last year, where would you feel we are now if 1 is really high anxiety and 10 is a good degree of comfort?
Is that a question for me?
Yeah.
Yes, okay.
Or any of the
anything else. Actually, Chair, I'm actually hopeful that we can be a bit more assured that the government. No, not assured. I'm more hopeful this year that the government will give partnerships an okay settlement, because they are probably increasingly cited on the pressures that the health service and the social care service together, which is what we deliver through the partnership, they're increasingly cited on it. I don't think they weren't. It's not that they weren't before, but 2020 will have brought that home. So the last couple of years have brought an element, but not complete, an element of ring fencing to partnership funding. That the loss of that would be quite difficult for us. But I am hopeful that there would be an element of ring-fenced funding kind of flowing into the partnership, and I'm probably more hopeful at this stage this year than I would have been at the same stage last year. It doesn't mean it will happen.
Yeah.
And I use the phrase assumption in our financial plans this afternoon, but that assumption is at the moment is also a hope.
Okay, thank you. And Peter?
Yeah, I noticed that phrase in this afternoon's papers, Sandy. Talking to our MSP some time ago, I said, why aren't these numbers ring fenced? Particularly it was for social care. And he said, because central government doesn't like ring fencing money because it means that we're removing local democracy, in inverted commas, I guess. So I have to say I'm not so hopeful as you seem to be, but time will tell. But hopefully you're correct. I mean, I'm concerned that it won't be, that these numbers won't be ring fenced, and we know what's happened in the past where the money's gone into, particularly into Angus Council, and some of it's dribbled out the other end and not the full amount.
Well, having taken on board escalating that myself, Peter, at the time, that's why we ended up with ring-fenced additional monies the following year. So
good. Okay. Well, I think if people are positive, that's fine.
Does go against the principles of local democracy and people understanding their local systems better and where to direct it. But that was an example, I guess, of where that falls down. Sandy.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I think, Peter, I do recall the example you're talking about. In the last, I think, couple of years, local authorities have had a flexibility to kind of interact with the funding. But I think, to be fair to Angus Council, they maybe haven't done as much of that as other council areas have. So we remember the instances where that has happened, but I think in other areas it potentially has happened even more. But I think it is quite a varied picture because it's a series of local views being expressed by council. So we'll see how it goes this year. But I have to say I'm hopeful, but that doesn't really count for very much.
Okay, fine. Let's all fingers crossed.
Thanks very much. Okay, we're being asked to consider and note the attached report. Everyone happy to do that? And thanks for your questions. Excellent. So moving on to item 8, which is the annual risk management report, and that's Gail, I believe. Yep.
Yes. I think it's relatively straightforward. For the eagle-eyed amongst you, on page 47, the clinical care and professional group section, I'd written 3 new risks had been identified for 1920, and I only had 2 bullet points there. I was expecting Peter or Andrew to challenge me. What I should have written is the 3 risks that were archived from April 19 to April 20, and 3 new risks identified from April 19 to April 20. Because we've actually had 2 new risks identified up till April, but from April to now, we've had an additional 3 risks. So apologies, Chair, the report goes from April to April, so I should have strengthened that.
Okay, thanks for that.
That one slipped past me. And Andy, I guess.
I thought it jumped out at me when I read it. I thought, oh dear. Yeah, I had 3 down, but the one that was going down was adult support and protection, but it was actually after April when I did that. So it'll be on to the next report.
That's fine. You're forgiven.
Up, Peter.
Anyone
have
have
any questions?
Tony has his hand up, I think.
Tony.
Thanks, Chair. Just a brief one. I mean, nothing in terms of the report, and I'm afraid this is a really picky audit point, and I can't help myself, but I can't go through a whole meeting without doing that, Gail. I'm sorry.
Oh.
No, I think the conclusion at the end is essentially there are adequate, and it talks about that our audit. I think all we'd want from, I think for the record is Gail's view as the person who wrote that report, that there are adequate and effective risk management arrangements in place. So I think for future, and we have no concerns over that, quite honestly, it's just for the record. And the other thing is, and I know why it didn't happen this year, but this would be a useful report to get next year in June with the, because it's a key part of your assurance for the thing. And we all know why it didn't happen this year, so that's by no means a criticism. So if Gail can say the words adequate and effective for the minutes now, and then make sure they're in the report for next year. So I'm sorry that's picky, but sometimes it just has to be.
Yes, I will say adequate and effective, though Tony knows my feelings on the word adequate. NHS Tayside gave feedback yesterday that our report from Angus was comprehensive. I like that word, Tony.
Well, I don't have it. Is there an issue with adding that into the string of words? I don't have an issue with that, as long as adequate and effective are in there. Okay. My concern, I guess, is, well, we all know why we're getting this in December rather than June. The capacity for catching up, for publishing it in June next year, and the implications that has on people's workload. I'm just, is that doable? And Sandy's got his hand up.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so we do the point that you've made, Tony. That is addressed in the body of the report. It would absolutely be our plan to have it to the June forum. It's in our work plan for coming to the June forum, so it can all be around, available in the summer for people in the audit committee. Jill Galloway, who is not here, but has been party to writing this report. I think she has actually suggested keeping an ongoing review of this report, within the partnership, talking about kind of a half-yearly refresh, not for particularly sharing with the audit committee. So no, Jill's sense was she would very much want to be on top of it, and I think we should be on target for getting the next year-end report to June.
Okay, so I see we're being asked to recommend any further actions that we consider required. Does anyone have any contribution to make on that, Gail?
Yes, I would agree with Sandy. I give an update to NHS Tayside Risk Management Committee every 3 months, Sandy. So there is a report gets developed every 3 months, and that's where we take a lot of the information for the annual report from. So that should be straightforward. Okay,
so we don't have any additional recommendations to make. Okay, is that where we are? We're noting the report. Yes. Thank you. Gail, do you want to take your hand down? I'm getting confused. Thanks. Okay. Right, can we move on to item 9, please? The external reports. And I just want to make the point, I find these very, very helpful, but I don't have any expectation that everyone reads every word of those. There will be things that pop up that might interest you, and I'm particularly interested, and it's one of the reasons I spoke about Public Health Scotland. That's a very high level document you might want to familiarise yourself with, but dip in and out of those. We're being asked to note the publications of the reports, and I'd like to thank Sandy for putting these under our noses and agree a way to channel that information set out through Microsoft Teams. I know I'm having some issues accessing reports on Teams, but that's something that we can maybe look at to see what works best. People okay with that? Peter, yeah.
Yeah, just if anybody doesn't believe it, the link to the Perth and Kinross IJB, I looked at that and I thought that's nonsense, but I double clicked on it and it works. So.
Yes, I got it. I have downloaded all those reports in today's folder. Okay, so thanks for that, Sandy. They are helpful. So we're noting it and looking to explore ways of making them more accessible to members. Okay.
Yeah, Chair, can I just quickly interrupt there, Julie, for a second? Yeah. So I think what I would like to be able to just check with board, are we happy in principle to move to an alternative channel of sharing these documents, subject to the evaluation that we've mentioned in the recommendation? So what we would do is we check it with everybody before we actually do that. But I'm just conscious the next audit committee is 4 months away, and that's actually quite a long chunk of the year. And I'd really kind of like to be able to progress this, but only if people come back and say, yeah, you know, Andy's up for it, Peter's up for it, Julie's up for it, Graham's up for it. If you are, so that's what we'll try and do over the next few while, and if people are happy, that we'll make that transition.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so item 10 is a verbal update on the external audit. I think that's Tony, is it?
Nope, that would be me, Chair.
That's what I thought, but I don't know why I wrote Tony. Thanks.
As you'll have noticed, there is no external audit annual audit plan on the agenda at this meeting, and we would normally bring you one. So it was to give you an update that Audit Scotland has been affected by COVID-19 in common with other public sector bodies, and our audits have been delayed, partly due to remote auditing taking longer and partly due to some public bodies having to redeploy staff or having issues with setting up their own remote working. So we've just finished the 2019-20 audit for local government, and we're just clearing up the tail end of grant claims just now. So this is our staff just coming out of the previous audit year and starting planning. So I would intend to bring your annual audit plan to the next audit committee, although I'd hope to agree it with Sandy and Gail before then. But just to say, we are going to spend the 2021 audit recovering from 2019-20. I would hope that our timing would remain similar to 2020. So we brought you the audited 2019-20 accounts and annual audit report to the August committee. I am really planning for that and hoping to deliver that, but I can't guarantee it 100% because we're only just looking at the resources we have just now, and we are carrying a few vacancies. So I will be doing my best to do that, and it worked out for 2019-20. So I am hopeful for the coming year that we can stick to the usual timescales. But I would let you know if that was going to change at the next committee. So unfortunately, you won't get the plan until the April committee. So it was just to make you all aware of that and take any questions on any impact on the audit or on Audit Scotland services, the IJB.
And you'll be having the same decisions to make as we do here in terms of what your priorities are and what is let go of or postponed in order to make that catch up. So yeah, appreciate that. Does anyone have any questions for Rachel? Nope, we're fine. Okay, thanks a lot, Rachel. That's helpful. And item 11 is the date of our next meeting, which is the 21st of April at 11:30. And remember, we reset the start times for our meetings next year. So that seems an awfully long way away. And we know a lot of water can go under a lot of bridges in that time. So I just want to take this opportunity to thank everyone for their invaluable and constant engagement in this committee. And I'm glad you're all still here, and I hope you and yours all stay safe and well over the winter period, and please do look after yourselves. I'll be thinking about you, and so I look forward to seeing you again in April, even though I'm seeing you this afternoon. Sandy, you had your hand up there.
Very briefly, just to keep in mind, we might try and slot in the development session before then. I think a logical time to do that is the lunchtime before the February IJB board meeting. Because theoretically anybody who's around that day would be around that day. So the afternoon they might be more likely to be around at lunchtime. So in the back of your minds, can you maybe just keep that possibility for the February session just in the back of your minds?
That'd be really helpful, actually. It'd be nice to break up that stretch of time, particularly maybe for Chris, actually, so that you can get your heads around a lot of the things that we were discussing today. Okay, so I can close the meeting now. Thank you very much, everyone. Chris, did you have your hand up there?
No, it was just to acknowledge that, Councillor, today has been a massive learning curve for me, as I'm sure everybody else will understand when they first sat on this committee for the first time as well. So bear with me with my sometimes long silences and lack of questions. I'm still trying to get soaked it up here, so thank you.
No, that's great. And feel free to get in touch if you have a question directly. Happy to do that. And if I can't help you, then I know one of the officers will be able to.
Yeah, absolutely. I just sort of note thanks to Sandy as well for the time that you gave us the other week, just to go over the sort of kind of mechanics and the remit of this committee. So thanks, Sandy, for that.
Good. Thank you. Thanks, everyone, and see you at 2 o'clock. Take care.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.